Next up, let's cover the forms, and we will actually be using one form on our first project where we are going to submit some user data and we're going to receive an email. So forms that are typically used, again, to collect some user data. So you probably know this, but whenever you sign up on a website, there's a form there. You enter your email, you enter your password, your username, and then they receive that information and they're going to create an account for you. Same thing goes with contact. When you hit submit, they're going to receive an email. So basically all it does, it collects some user data and it gets sent somewhere. It depends where, who knows. There's a lot of options you can do with forms. So how can we create a form? Well, we just use the form tag. So I'm gonna say form and hit tab. And as you can see, it automatically gives me one attribute, which is called action. We're not going to be using this for now because all this action does is it submits the form somewhere. So after we submit the form, this action gets executed. But for right now, let's remove it. We're going to add it a bit later. And in this form, we can add a bunch of different kinds of inputs. So the first one that's going to be probably the most common one is going to be called input. Type text. So if I just type input and hit tab, obviously it's going to give me the most default one, and this one's called text. So if I hit save, I can type just normal text in here. All right. So now it's very hard to see what this does because it's unclear. It doesn't have like a title or maybe a label to it. So we can actually add a label to it. So if I go up here, I can type label and I'm going to hit tab. And as you can see, it gives me 4. All right, so for what? Well, I need it for this input. I need to describe where this label belongs to, and it's to this input. So to give an identifier to this, you just add an ID. And I can set an ID. As you can see, it's a unique identifier. And it's also heavily used to basically to modify in CSS or to identify it in JavaScript if you want, you can use there as well. So if I give an ID here, we can access this input basically through our CSS and JavaScript. And in here, I'm just gonna give it an ID of name, all right? Or user, let's call it user. I wanna have the user. So I can say the label is for user. And I can add a descriptive text that you see on like every website is in this label here. I can say username. And this doesn't have to match. The text that we add here can be anything that we want. But as you can see here, I kind of keep it simplified and easy. But here I can use the full name. I can do username here as well. But I like to keep it very simple. Everything lowercase, just user. Okay? So as you can see, now we have username and we have our label and our input. So super cool. Now, besides this, the label, it's very useful because let me show you something. If I add another input here, I'm actually going to change this to type email, right? Now check this out. If I add another label here, and I'm not going to name this in any way, I'm just going to say email. All right, well, what's the difference between this and this? Like these two and these two, like what does it actually help me with by adding for user here and binding it to this input? What's the difference? Well, check this out. If I'm gonna click on email here on this label, it doesn't really do anything. I have to click in the input here. However, if you specify on the label that, hey, this is specifically for this ID of user, this input, well, if I click on the label now, it automatically jumps me in to the input tab here. So boom, as you can see, it activates the input so I can start writing. So this makes it a bit more accessible and a bit more easy for the users to write the inputs. So lastly, what I want to show you, and I also want to show you the difference between text and email here, is at the end, if I just add a simple button here, and I'm going to say submit like this, and take a look. I can add a attribute of type submit. And all this is going to do is it's going to submit all the information that we have in the form. So if I hit save and I'm going to just type something and I'm going to add an email. All right, just a random old email that I have. I'm going to hit submit. Boom, the form gets submitted. Now it doesn't get submitted anywhere, unfortunately, because we don't have an action here, but it works. Then that's all that matters. So here's the difference between the type text and type email. I can add any text I want here. However, here, if I don't add an email, as you can see, we get an error here saying, please include an ad in the email address. So it doesn't actually submit the form. So HTML actually does some validation for us if we specifically specify that, hey, this is an email, okay? We only want to have an email. So the form doesn't get submitted anymore until this is actually an email. So that's super awesome. Now let's go up here to the form, and I'm actually gonna add an action, okay? And I wanna show you that we can also use action to navigate to another page. So I made a contact.html here. It's super simple. There's nothing really in it. And I can add a /contact.html. Hit save, and now take a look. Whenever I submit something, it's gonna jump me over to that page. So you can also do that if you want. And this, by the way, also works with an anchor tag. So if I add an anchor tag here, and I'm gonna say, link me to another page, we saw that we could have used this with links, but we can also navigate to another HTML page. So I'm gonna say contact.html, and I'm also gonna add a target of blank. So hit save and take a look. Even this link tag can also navigate to another HTML. So I thought I'd show you that as well. However, the way we will be using action here is we are actually going to use a third-party website, and we're going to submit the information there for them. Or later on, when you're going to work with JavaScript and Node.js, or maybe another programming language, you're going to submit this one to a specific URL. So you get that in your backend server or somewhere else. So for now, this is kind of useless for us. So we covered this, we covered the labels, we covered the inputs, and we covered the ID, which is again just used specifically so we can access this specific input in our CSS or JavaScript. Okay, and lastly, what I want to show you is something called name. So on the input here, we can also add a name called user. So I'm going to use the same as the ID here, and for the input type email, I'm also going to give a name of email. And the reason I am doing this, the only fields that get submitted in this form are the ones that have a name on it. So make sure you put a name of all the inputs that you want to submit in the form. And just to kind of quickly show you what gets submitted, if I type here add and just provide a random email, and if I hit submit, you're gonna see up here in the URL, we're gonna get user equals ed. And this is basically the name. So user equals, and this is the value that we gave it. And then we have email, so the name email equals edmagician@gmail.com. Okay, next up, I want to take a look at a dropdown where you can select multiple different values. To create a dropdown, all you have to do is say select and hit tab. And now this also gives you a name and an ID. I'm just gonna call this products. All right, and I'm gonna give it an ID of product. So if we ever want to select this in our CSS or JavaScript, we also have a unique identifier. And in here, if we save this, we just have this simple drop down here, but it doesn't really do anything. So to add options, well, we just write option. That's a HTML element that we can use. And in here, I can give a name to my product. Maybe I have a MacBook, all right? So there we go, we have a MacBook. I can duplicate this, bring this down and call this an iPhone or something. Hit save, and now we have two. So there we go. And what this value does is this is actually the thing that gets submitted in the form, right? This is kind of the text that we want to give it. This can just be whatever we want. But when we hit submit, the thing that's in the value is gonna be submitted in the form. So I can say MacBook 2018 like this for the value, and I can say iPhone 11 like this. So when we actually add our information here, I select MacBook, hit submit. If we expand this, you're gonna see that products is going to be equal to MacBook 2018. So the actual value that's in here is the thing that's going to be sent to wherever we are sending it to. Okay, but what if we want to submit a message? Having the small input is not that great, because if we write a lot, we cannot really see anything else that we write, that we previously wrote, right? And I cannot add a new line. If I hit enter, then the form is getting submitted. So how can we get around that? Well, we have another element called a text area. So I'm going to just say text, and as you can see, it appears there. I'm going to hit enter, and oh my goodness, what's going on here? Well, we know name, so I'm going to give it a message. I'm going to give it a message ID as well, but we have this calls and rows. So if we hit save, as you can see, now we have a multi-line element here that we can write a lot of text to. And we can also expand this if we want, like that. Take a look. That's pretty cool. There are a few attributes that we can add to these inputs, and I want to show you a quick few ones that might be useful. If we go up here to the input tag, we can also limit the number of text that we can add in here. So let's go here, and all I'm going to do is type in max length like this. And I can set a max length equal to, I can say 12 or 16 maybe. I don't want more than 16. I'm gonna do something low, like 8 for now, just so I can show you. And now if I have something superbly long, I cannot type anymore. As you can see, it limits me from typing. So you can do a limit of something like 60 here, just so it's not like super spam, or 30. And we can also do a min length here. So we can say minimum length should be at least 6 characters. So this is probably a bit more useful for you. So if I add something like 1, 2, 3 and hit submit, as you can see, it's going to give me, hey, you need 6 characters. You're using only 4 right now. So this is another great check that you can add to your text inputs if you want to limit it. So we have limited our input here for the username, and we also did it for the email. Now, if you don't want to have this autocomplete thing, you can also turn this off. I wouldn't recommend turning it off. It's a nice option to have, but you can do that as well. So if we go to the, let's see, where are you, email here, and you can say autocomplete. As you can see, you can turn that off like this. So when we go here now, it doesn't display that for us. It still displays here, but it doesn't display here anymore. You can also add the autocomplete on top of the form if you want to disable everything. So if you don't want it to appear here or either on the email, you can just go here and say autocomplete off, and that's going to get rid of everything for you. Another one that might be useful is you can also add some placeholder text in here, in the username, in the email, and in the text area. So maybe let's go here, add another attribute of placeholder. And maybe we can add something like characters should be 6 minimum, or something like that. As you can see, that appears in there as well. Or I've seen some people not use the label and they just use a placeholder. To be honest, I'm not a super big fan of that, but you could say username in here. So when you click on it and you start typing, as you can see, it disappears. So it just stays there until you start typing. You might also have some elements that might not be required. It might be just optional. Maybe we want to have the username and email and the message. So we can go here, and on the username, we can add a required. We can also do the same for the email here, and we can also do for the text area. So for this one, we might necessarily not even need a value selected. So what I can do is just add another option here and just leave this empty. All right, so no value and just empty. Okay, and then I'm gonna move the selected, I'm gonna get rid of it, so nothing is selected. So now if we add some text and an email, let's make this longer because I think I have that limit on, and if I submit, this is gonna work just fine. So as you can see, the value there is gonna be submitted with nothing. So let's take a look, where is it? select products. As you can see, it doesn't have anything in the products. It's equal to nothing. Let me show you another quick one that might be useful. This one is called input type radio. So let's type in input type radio. And here again, we basically can give it a name, whatever name we want. Let's say MacBook. All right. And we can basically copy this multiple times. So like 4 times, okay? And what we can do is change the value of it. So I'm gonna say value, and this is gonna be the MacBook. All right. Now here's the interesting part. Let me also add a button type submit. Type submit. And there we go, we're gonna say submit. So here's basically the difference between this and this. This one, we want to make general, kind of what is this about? It's a product, all right? So we don't want the actual product name in here because this is the value that's gonna be submitted. So here, we're gonna actually rename this to products, like this, products. Okay, and I'm gonna copy and paste it here. This is gonna be the same value across the whole name. All right, and only the value is gonna be different. So I'm gonna say value, this one's iPhone, and let's do another one, value, I don't know. Amazon, we are buying Amazon, everybody. Value, and this is gonna be Cookboy, which is me. So let's hit save. All right, so when we're submitting this, so if I click on one and hit submit, as you can see, the products is gonna be equal to MacBook. So this is kind of a general one that we're gonna give to the name. We're gonna give it to all of them. And then this is gonna be the actual product or value that's gonna be submitted. Okay.